As you can see, we have a pair of Santa Cruzes. This is the latest generation Santa Cruz Bronson. That is the latest generation Santa Cruz Hightower. These are two of the most popular trail bikes on the planet, and Santa Cruz recently reinvented both of them. This bike is now in its 5th generation. The Hightower's in its 4th. If you've been tuning into our channel, you might have seen that we got these bikes a couple of months ago and we started doing a bit of a first impressions. Since then, Blake spent that whole time out in the trails, testing them back to back, comparing them. And in this video, we're going to go into a bit of a deep dive into the personality of each bike and really what sets them apart, some of the kind of little nuances, and ultimately which bike might suit you better from Blake's opinion. Mate, so let's kick this off by going for a bit of an overview of the Bronson right here. Give us the main sort of facts and figures of this bike.
Yeah, so since its inception, basically the Bronson's been the quiver killer nearly. So they've been rocking 150mm rear travel, 160mm front travel. It is exclusively an MX bike, so mixed wheel, so 27.5 in the rear, 29 in the front.
All right, well then, what about the Hightower?
So the Hightower is basically the same, except for it's got a bigger rear wheel. These bikes are so similar. I almost didn't believe it when we first sort of started receiving the press, like the media packs and that kind of thing. Basically down to the millimeter, bar the chainstay on the Bronson is slightly longer. They're essentially identical on paper. Like I mentioned, the Hightower is a specific 29er, so there's no chopping and changing wheel sizes out the rear on these bikes. Dedicated 29er for the Hightower, dedicated mixed wheel MX for the Bronson. And Santa Cruz have basically done this to have no compromises. Essentially, when you have a mulletable 29er bike, you're compromising somewhere, whether it's in geometry in general, or if it's suspension kinematics to make either or both work. You have to make compromises somewhere. And Santa Cruz basically said, no, we're not willing to make compromises to the performance of either bike. So we're sticking with dedicated wheel sizes to both models.
Interesting, and that really validates both models in the lineup as well. Now, when these bikes, obviously, as you can see, both of them very, very similar, like Blake's been mentioning, and they even look, at a glance, they look identical. Yeah. But yeah, wheel size quite different. When both these bikes were developed alongside each other, and they were released near, close to enough to each other, there was a lot of talk about anti-squat. Now, tell us a bit about what anti-squat is and how it relates to what Santa Cruz were chasing when they were developing these two bikes. Yeah,
so basically, when we first saw pictures and the bikes were released and whatnot, obviously it still looks like your sort of quintessential VPP linkage, but compared to the previous models and a couple of the other models that are still in the lineup that haven't seen any updates, does look a little bit different. Obviously, we've got this sort of little void in the frame there. The shock, it does look a little bit more horizontal in the bike. It is a little bit lower down. It is a little bit further back. Not by heaps, but by enough that, if you look at it next to a Nomad, for example, which again looks very, very similar, it's a VPP bike, you can definitely tell that the shock's in a different position. And basically the engineers at Santa Cruz have done this to reduce anti-squat. Not entirely, you don't want to eliminate it altogether, because it still does definitely have its purpose and have its place within the way that the bike feels on the trail and that kind of thing. But essentially, in reducing anti-squat, it's kind of reducing the pedal kickback and the forces that you feel through the pedals when the suspension is compressing. Now, you don't want to eliminate that altogether, because you still want to have a little bit of force coming back through the pedals, or at least I do. Obviously, horses for courses, different people want different things from their bike. But I like to have that little bit of tension in the chain, because I really like to pump through the trails and generate speed that way through the undulations and rollers and whatnot.
Speed without pedaling.
Exactly right, yeah. And having that chain to sort of push back on gives me something solid to push into without the pedals moving. I don't know if you've ever ridden a bike where you've maybe snapped the chain on the trail or something like that. It feels whack. It feels so kooky.
Oh, right, without a chain?
Trying to ride a bike without a chain, like if you've never done it before, obviously like pump track races are a different story.
Weight distribution of it's you're lost, aren't you?
Exactly right, yeah. So while the high pivots and whatnot are all the craze at the moment to reduce anti-squat further, that feeling is almost, it takes a lot of getting used to. So you still want to have something to be able to push back on and force, you know, put all your bodily forces through the bike when you're generating speed, even like in and out of corners, that kind of thing. But yeah, essentially the engineers have come up with a number that they wanted to achieve, and this is how they've gotten to this point of the frame redesign, essentially.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's just focus on the Bronson for a second. Let's sort of split this a little bit. Tell us a bit about how this bike rides. And I guess, you know, furthermore, what kind of rider is going to be picking, like wanting this particular style of bike? And then we'll obviously compare it to this. So let's just zone in on the Bronson for a second. How does it ride?
So naturally, the mixed wheel bike feels a little bit more nimble, a little bit more playful. You have less mass behind you. So that flickability, I guess you could say, in and out of corners, it does feel a bit more maneuverable in the air. And that's not to say that, you know, the Hightower doesn't feel that, but it's just a bit of a general, more of a general feeling of maneuverability. It does feel a little bit lighter in the back of the bike. Like I said, it does have a slightly longer chainstay to make sure that it's still stable enough at high speed and that kind of thing. But it's a bit more of a playful bike for sure. And that's sort of the bike that I generally do sort of lean towards.
Interesting. So how does the playfulness of the Bronson compared to the Hightower, how would we kind of describe this bike's personality and how it rides?
The Hightower to me feels a little bit more racy. It does definitely carry speed a little bit better because of that larger rear wheel. Obviously 29ers are proven nowadays. The rollover over, you know, your square edges, roots, rocks, that kind of thing, it is definitely noticeable. Obviously been pretty bloody lucky having both these bikes. We're literally back to back these bikes like we have today out on the trails half a dozen times now, where I'll take both bikes out, I'll ride one section on the Bronson, ride that same section straight away on the Hightower. And that's where you can really compare apples to apples, I guess you could say. So the Hightower feels a little bit more racy. It carries speed a bit better. It's got for the exact same tires, same wheels, other than the size, noticeably more grip. And I've been setting the suspension up identically on these two bikes as well. It's got a bit more of a racy feel about it. You feel a little bit more upright, even though the Geo tells me I'm not. But you definitely feel a little bit more upright in your riding position. And it feels like a bit more of a long haul sort of bike. And again, the Bronson is more than capable of that as well. But the Hightower feels like it's less cumbersome on the way back up the hill. Again, larger rear wheels, rolling over things a little bit better. So from that aspect, you could say that it climbs better, even though pedaling efficiency wise, the suspension systems are the same. But basically, yeah, it's just that rolling resistance, and the getting up and over things is definitely easier with the 29-inch rear wheel.
Interesting. Okay, so the Hightower has a little bit of an advantage when we're talking about ascending, efficiency for climbing and pedaling. What about comparing the two bikes now head to head? Which one descends better?
To me personally, I prefer the MX wheel for descending, even though I know, scientifically this is going to roll over things a little bit better. I tend to pull the bike up over things more than I let it roll over things, if that makes sense. So that's where I tend to lean more towards the MX rear wheel. I'm also a shorter guy with a very short inseam, so I need as much clearance over that rear wheel as I can get. If I haven't ridden a 29-inch rear wheel for a while, it does take me a little bit of getting used to again. There's been a few times where I've been caught out with a big old bum bars and nearly thrown myself over the bars. So that's where I definitely feel more comfortable and confident straight away every day of the week with the smaller rear wheel. But that's not to say that, again, the Hightower is at a disadvantage. There's going to be a lot of riders out there who will have a massive advantage from having that rear wheel, having that larger rear wheel. But yeah, essentially, to me, the Bronson does descend a little bit better. Again, smaller rear wheel, even though the heights and everything are the same, I can get further over the back of the bike. I can ride a lot more aggressively. And I have a little bit more fun with the 27.5 rear wheel as well, personally at least.
Interesting. So for the viewers at home that are obviously watching this right now, can you paint a bit of a picture of, like, if they were to put themselves on either bike, which style of rider is going to the Bronson be more suited to?
To me, I think a more aggressive, playful rider is going to probably find more advantages with the Bronson. I think you're going to have a little bit more fun with it. You're going to be able to throw it around a little bit easier. Again, the weights of the bikes they're so light anyway, but there's less rotational mass at the back. Physically, the size of the wheel is less. And if you're not necessarily worried about a race run time or anything like that, you're not going to miss out from having slightly less grip, slightly less rollover capabilities with the smaller rear wheel. So I think like your aggressive, playful, loves to hit the jumps, isn't worried about you know, what they're coming in the state series or whatever, the Bronson's going to be your bike.
Unreal. And I guess ultimately that then answers where the Hightower, the strengths of Hightower as well. Look, one of the things that we always get asked about whenever we're doing reviews, let alone have the opportunity to do a back-to-back review like this one, which has been really, really cool. Want to ask you, if you had to spend your own money on either of these bikes and own just one,
yep.
Which one are you going to? Which one would you opt for?
This was a tricky one for me because I had the Hightower first, and I thought to myself, I might actually buy this bike when we're done with it. But to me, again, it would have to be the Bronson. That's just me and my personal riding style. If I hadn't ridden the Bronson, I would have said the Hightower for sure, because this bike it's so damn capable. Like these modern day trail bikes, like we've been saying it for so many years now, but the modern day trail bikes, or like almost mini enduro bikes now, with the way that the geometry and the suspension performance is heading, like they're so bloody capable. Like you could literally have, unless you lived in Jindabyne and you're riding Threadbow every other week, like your body would get pretty punished on a short travel bike like this, or a mid travel bike I should say. But the MX 150, 160mm travel bike, like you could literally have that in your garage and nothing else. And you know what, you're riding 85% of the trails in Australia more than comfortably.
Unreal. Well, there you have it. Santa Cruz 2 latest. Beautiful carbon fiber trail machines. Yeah. Quite similar in terms of looks, quite similar in terms of design, but those subtle differences that really set them apart, and the personalities that Blake has just discussed. Yeah, we've been super fortunate to have both these bikes for a few months. Definitely big thanks to Santa Cruz Global and Australia. Both of these bikes are available at Santa Cruz dealers right now across the country, and they're both available in quite a few different spec levels as well, so different price points and whatnot. Definitely worth checking out if you're thinking about maybe upgrading your current trail bike, looking for something that doesn't have a motor. The all-new Bronson and all-new Hightower are definitely two class-leading platforms in that 29 purebred or MX. But yeah, that's us for now. Stay tuned to our channel for plenty more.